I'm Chris Alexander, the editor-in-chief of this magazine right here. That's Fangoria, the first in Fright since 1979. I am proud to be the editor-in-chief of this magazine, taking over from the long reign of Tony Timpone, who took over from Uncle Bob Martin. What can I say? I'm living the dream. I literally am. I'm doing this because I love it, because it's an adventure, because I've loved movies, and I've loved horror movies, and I've loved everything bizarre and counterculture and strange and everything that Fangoria represents since I was fucking born. Since I have a memory, I have loved this stuff. So here I sit. Well, I sit in my office, but I stand in my office, actually, but I am the editor of this magazine, and it's still a surreal trip. And I know I've said that before, and I'll keep saying it until the day I stop being the editor of this magazine. It's amazing. And one of the perks of being the editor of Fangoria magazine is that I can connect with all these people that, to me, when I was a kid, seemed like they existed in another fucking dimension. And I'm not connecting with them because I want to go around saying, hey, I'm connecting with them. Hey, I'm connecting with them with a genuine interest in what goes on behind their eyes. These are people that I have inspired my intellect and inspired me at a visceral level, have ignited passion within me, and the fact that a lot of these guys are still alive, and the fact that I can share space with them and share ideas with them and ask them questions that I want to ask about the world we live in and about their art and their perceptions of their art and the business that they're in. I mean, it's phenomenal. So one of those guys is, of course, our cover boy in issue 310, and that's Nicolas Cage. Now, 10 issues ago, issue 301, we had a little piece on Drive Angry, and we didn't get Cage for that. Now, I've interviewed Cage a few times before this, but we couldn't get Cage for Drive Angry. No big deal. I swore at that. I love this man. I love the weird-ass performances he has been giving on screen since his first film, even as Fry Cook #2 in fucking Fast Times at Ridgemont High. He was weird. Cage is just a weird motherfucker, and I say that with love. So I wanted to do a big splashy piece on Cage and talk about all his eccentricities that he has somehow managed, and it's not because he's Francis Ford Coppola's nephew. It's not. There's a certain sensibility that Cage has that he has somehow wormed into the mainstream. The man has won an Oscar for being what he is naturally, organically, and it's just perverse and strange. And on top of that, the man fucking loves horror movies and comic books and rock and roll and just general weird, arcane shit. He belongs in this magazine, absolutely. So we sat down. We actually, to fly to the Bahamas is really cheap, so I flew down to the Bahamas where the guy lives. And we sat down, we killed a giant sea snail, and we talked about Hammer horror for like an hour. And then we got into the guts of his new movie, Ghost Rider 2, The Spirit of Vengeance. Is it any good? I have no idea. I'm a big fan of the first one. I say a guilty pleasure, but I'm not that guilty because it's a great Cage performance. So I can't vouch for the second one, but I can vouch for the fact that Cage believes in it. And I think that's the beauty of Cage's work, is that every movie, no matter how lowly it is, and some of them are low. I'm looking at you, Wicker Man. He puts his whole heart and soul into these things. You always believe that Cage believes it, and it makes him an endearing and interesting performer. I think it was Sean Penn a few years ago, a former friend of Cage's, that said, Nick Cage has stopped being an actor, he is now a performer. Yeah, so we need more of these guys. Cage reminds me of the modern Vincent Price, and that ties into the next issue, but we won't talk about that yet. I won't blow the load. So Cage and I are sitting down in the Bahamas. We're talking about this stuff, and one of the questions I asked him, I said, Mr. Cage, you know, horror fans love you, case in point, but you haven't made many horror movies, legitimate horror movies. There's 8mm, there's the aforementioned Wicker Man, the Ghost Rider movies, if you can kind of consider them horror. They play by those rules, certainly. But there aren't. He also produced Shadow the Vampire. Don't forget that. That was his labor of love, brought that to screen. But he hasn't been, obviously, in a lot of movies that are considered genre, you know, outright legitimate horror movies. And one of the things he said to me that made me realize he belongs even more on this cover than I previously thought was that, you know, every performance I do, whether it be in a romantic comedy or anything, or a thriller or an action film, there is horror in there. There is terror in there. Horror is not splatter. It's not blood and guts. It is something going on within. And I thought, yeah, you're damn right. Every movie, Cage, you're kind of the outsider. You're kind of the Frankenstein monster to some degree. You're the oddball, the weird element. You're the Klaus Kinski of today that is injected into the natural world. and somehow you make it work. So anyways, Cage is on the cover. It was a great interview. I had to split it into 2 parts. And the beauty of this is, too, is that in Cage's L.A. apartment, a few years ago, he had commissioned Basil Gogos, the great Basil Gogos, to paint an oil-on-canvas picture of him as Johnny Blaze, turning into the Ghost Rider. And no one has ever seen this before, except unless you visited the motherfucker. So he actually gave us the rights to print it. So there is an original Basil Gogos of Cage as Johnny Blaze as the Ghost Rider on the flip side of this cover. So we got this crazy batshit still of him turning into a digital death on the front, burning up, and then we got this great painting on the back. I mean, aesthetically, that's pretty fucking cool. Love Cage or loathe him, and I know a lot of you guys hate his guts. That's okay. I don't care about that. But I think when you read this feature, you'll get it. You'll get the humor of it, and you'll get that this guy's one of us, Gooble Gobble. He loves this shit, and his whole identity is informed by horror. Horror is indeed everywhere. It infiltrates every corner of our life. Our agents, our emissaries, the lovers of this shit are not just toiling around in their basements. They are out there in the world. They're doctors. They're lawyers. They are Hollywood actors. And they're slowly changing the system from within because they like weird, dark, crazy shit. So, speaking of other weird, dark, crazy shit, Johnny Blaze is not the only refugee of hell in this issue of Fangoria. We have look back at Hellraiser, 2 of the Cenobites, Butterball, and the female Cenobite, and their recollections of working in that world, and of their feelings about what's happened to the franchise in the interim since they first splattered across screen in the first 2 features, Hellraiser and Hellraiser 2, Hellbound, respectively. We also have a fantastic interview with Barbara Crampton, who was so great in those early Stuart Gordon movies, and who kind of fell off the radar a little bit, but is back now in a film called You're Next, and is also in Rob Zombie's The Lords of Salem. So we sit down with Crampton for a really frank, warts and all interview about her career, again, what she thinks about the genre, and about a very serious health scare she had that almost knocked her down. We also look at The Woman in Black. More Hammer horror. You know, we love our British horror. And this is a revamp Hammer horror film starring Daniel Radcliffe from the Harry Potter films. Harry Potter all grown up. And if you're familiar with the source material, both the novel and the original BBC telefilm, The Woman in Black, you'll know that it is one of the scariest goddamn ghost stories ever written, ever filmed. And here's hoping that this new version, which I'll be seeing in a couple days as of this recording, it is Saturday night, I'll be seeing it on Thursday, check back with me then. Let's hope that it's as good as its precedents, as the sources that came before it. Again, the book and that amazing telefilm. If you've never seen it, please dig it up. It's not easy to find, but it's worth the trip. There's so much more in this issue, I can't even begin to tell you. We introduce a new comic book. That's right, South Texas Blues. It's this meta story by Christopher Garetano about Tobe Hooper and the kind of weird psycho trip he went on in the early 70s and how he discovered salvation through a chainsaw and ended up making the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's really, really, really good. We look at Sleep Tight, another great supernatural story. We go and look at the original Dark Shadows, which is what we've been kind of doing, counting up or counting down to the Johnny Depp, Tim Burton revamp, literally revamp, but which I'm looking forward to, and I know some of you, again, some of you nasty pricks don't like Burton anymore. Well, suck it. I don't care. And there's so much more. The Divide, which is a movie I despised, but many people on our team loved it, and I think it literally has divided horror fans right down the center. Which side do you fall on? Who knows? But read the article. Might convince you to sway either way. Again, so much more in this issue. The Gray, a great Liam Neeson tying bottles to his fingers and beating the shit out of Timberwolves. How can you resist? And a look back at The Deadly Spawn, which is one of the great nickel and dime, no budget, right to VHS classics of the early 1980s. I'm getting excited just going, and I made this magazine, and I'm getting excited just talking about it. So enough of this. We got Nicolas Cage on the front turning into Ghost Rider, and we got all kinds of crazy stuff. I am Chris Alexander, very excited about the magazine that I put my blood, sweat, tears, and other fluids into. Fangoria. Bye.